Let me introduce you to somebody who's going to talk. I did mention the idea of being a dinosaur. In the old days, like these guys up here, you knew what your championship was, you planned back from that, and every step was going to take you to that championships. In today's world, athletes are early at the top end. And how you plan your year, folks, will change if you're not in that territory already. And the person who will give us best advice on that is Keely Customers.
Hello. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak here. It's always great. And I think coaches sharing information with coaches is the most important piece that we have to accelerate our programs. And this in-person meetings are extremely valuable. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk here and speak at this. And so preparing for the international year, you're to win. I go right back to when you started. It's like the winning piece isn't, I'm not talking about a gold medal. I'm talking about between you and your athlete, what you're trying to achieve for this specific competition, for this specific event. What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your athlete? I really believe, and I can see it in your question from the beginning, championship performances are not built in the final weeks. They are built by the quality of the plan that begins months before the competition, sometimes years, sometimes quite strenuous. To be completely honest, it takes quite a bit of time to get people to where you want them to be. And the data collection for that is just a perfect example from this morning. Yes.
So I should explain the it's that one.
That one. Oh, thank you. Oh, there we go. And so just going through a couple of things that are very, I think, usual things that you're probably doing on a daily basis, and hopefully trying to do that, is consistent training. And so year over year, consistency pays off. The best numbers that we have, the best predictor of performances that we have, is the consistency of your athletes' training in the system that you've developed. Whether that's by you personally, or maybe that's by your strength and conditioning coaches, maybe that's by your nutritionist. But keeping that as consistent as possible will give you the best returns in what's happening with your athletes. I would encourage you to avoid. Thank you, sir. I would encourage you to avoid having excessive interruptions in training loads. And so that can happen through, unfortunately for us, obviously in track and field, through injuries. And so when we have those happening, it really does affect what's happening at the final, hopefully, major competitions that you're trying to get to. So trying to avoid excessive interruptions in your training load. And then that you're trying to progress in a gradual, gradually. And that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. I really like going after Matt because he just shows about you don't have to lift a house, to get the awesomeness that we need to get. You can do these things in very prescriptive ways to help your athletes get to where they need to be without having to overload it. Continuously lift houses to move fast, to jump high, to do all the things you need to do. The other piece is obviously quality coaching, clear communication, and the individual planning and evidence-based progressions. Again, talking back to Matt, I also love collecting data, and data is part of what it is when you have those discussions with your athletes about what this looks like. If you don't have data to show where they've gone, it's hard for them to see where they need to go next. So by having the data, you're able to show progressions, and you're also able to help them understand what could happen next. And sometimes a surprise data about maybe they don't need 7 hours before, maybe your person needs 16 hours before. When I was working with my athletes, we were going to Brazil, javelin thrower. My usual train of thought was 48 hours before, that would be our last lifting session before we go into the competition. But for him, the 3 years before that, all the data that we collected was really about him showing us our last major big day had to be 4 days before, which was extremely unusual for a throwing athlete. And so I was just like, this is something that we didn't do. This wasn't heard of or discussed when I talked to other throws coaches. They're like, no, that's too long. It's too long away from the goal. But for him specifically, that's what he needed. And it earned him a silver medal through that progression and through that data collection. So it was a really cool experience. Making sure that we have regular feedback and are tracking and aligned coach-athlete goals. Sometimes I find that you begin the year talking to your athlete about here's what we're hoping to try to do this year. This is what we want to get done. And then you're mid-year, you don't have mid-year checks. Now your athlete's thinking, because maybe they've had a fantastic year, Now they want to do these other things. Now they want to go to these other events. They've been invited to other places. And they're like, oh yeah, it's okay, coach. It's just an extra track meet. It's okay, I just have one more extra thing. Or it's going to be doing this one load piece. It's going to be fine. Let me try to do this. This is where we can get into trouble when things are starting to happen. Obviously, systematic periodization for your athletes, making sure that that's going on, and the technical teachings. All of these are sound practices. I'm sure you're doing that quite well and finding people that you can talk to and build your programs with. But this consistent training and quality coaching is quite important to making sure that the athlete has the win of what you're looking for in the year, in the period, and maybe in the quadrennial that you're looking for. The recovery and health, mental, physical, and your IST team. I'm talking about really trying to get your athletes ready to go, incorporating other people to help you to ensure that what you're doing with your athletes is working, and that you have other people to bounce ideas off of it and to kind of check-ins. It's an essential multiplier. Without it, training improvements do not stick, they won't hold. As coaches, I think the old school methodology maybe, and I know that one of my greatest mentors, less romantic, he was very much about trying to be all things to everyone in the beginning of older days. And as he understood more and grew more and developed with more people, he was able then to really talk about his strength and conditioning people and having discussions with them, or the medical people that he had and having discussions with them, helping them to make sure that the athletes were ready to go for when they needed to be ready. Some of the very simple things that are really on track now for what you need to be doing is sleep patterns, the data that we're getting from sleep. The biggest thing about recovery is sleep. So it's really high right now in all of the trainings and all of the methodologies across multiple sports, not just track and field, is that if you can do sleep, you make sure your athletes are sleeping well, you're going to have a tremendous amount of recovery. And again, depending on athletes, and this is going to be your data development, how much sleep your athlete needs, what that looks like, is going to be up to your athlete and their body. The nutrition and hydration. Again, just talking this morning about what it is to figure out your nutrition, to figure out what the athlete needs for their nutrition and their hydration. Taking care of your soft tissue care and your strength, balancing, what does that look like? The mental recovery, and then thinking about burnout management. There's always, we talk more and more about the psychology of sport and what it is when you're going to larger events and how the athlete reacts in larger events. How do you know how they're going to react, right? Hopefully you've done some things beforehand to get them ready in order so that they can be at their best at the moment that you want them to be at their best. It's the biggest thing for us. It's like performance on demand. It's like at the beginning of the year, you're going to talk about the meets that you really want your athletes to come out and do very well in. It may not be the meet that you were hoping for when you have these discussions. Maybe your athlete wants to do really well at Diamond League, but really you're thinking that, Commonwealth Games is quite important to us, so let's try to do that. And so there's a couple of things that why you want to be on side with what's happening with your athlete. And so when you're talking about the mental recovery piece and making sure that that's good to go, you want to ensure that you're on the same page about what that looks like, and they're good and happy about that.
Can I just add to that, to emphasize the importance of recovery? We've got to understand that adaptation happens during recovery, not during the stimulus. And unfortunately, for a lot of coaches, they don't quite get that. If things are not going well, they just load even higher. But the fact is, recovery is during recovery that you adapt. Please hold that in mind, because it's not just for the protecting the system, the long-term growth, and it's not just physical. It's mental and it's emotional. And I promise you, a lot of coaches get that wrong. I got it wrong. Eddie Jones, when we're preparing for the Rugby World Cup, I had not taken account of the cost of emotional investment against the All Blacks in the semi-final. The team just did. It wasn't that they hadn't recovered physically for the final, they hadn't recovered emotionally from the cost of investing in that semi-final. And the two guys at the back will tell you how often people do their final in the semi-final, and it doesn't come out in the final. So again, recovery, absolutely critical. Sorry.
That's okay. I totally appreciate that. Any input as well, please go ahead, jump that in. The recovery will protect that you have the planned rest days and the deloading weeks that are really quite essential. And then the information that you find from your recovery. You know, again, a beautiful example this morning. It's like, you know, in week 1 or week 2, that's when she's going to have the best opportunities. You gather that data as you allow recovery to happen. As you're gathering your data on recovery and how much time your athletes need. It's quite important to go through the systems and do that. Obviously, the technical mastery piece, the repetition of correct patterns, not just volume. Yes.
So the deload section, is that different from males to females? With what I would say.
Well, I believe it's quite different from males to females. And I also believe that you have to really take into care and account the whole menstrual cycle. Like if you are, people always talk about the menstrual cycle, kind of going off, but that's okay. People talk about the menstrual cycle as if it's a negative thing. And you know, like if a person has her period during a competition, it's going to really affect her. I really like looking at the menstrual cycle as that 2 weeks beforehand, when she is jacked, full of all these wonderful natural things. And the information that you can get during that phase of her menstrual cycle, you can really get some really fantastic opportunities to be loading the person up during this time. Or if you can get that menstrual cycle to go into when you talk at the beginning of the year about the most important event, sometimes you're able to adjust your menstrual cycle to make sure that they're hitting this at the perfect time. And if you know on day 12 to day 15, this is when she's at her best with her hormones and her reactions and all these things, when her body feels fantastic, you hit that, you've hit the golden lucky coin, to be honest, right? And so I think the women are kind of nodding, going, yeah, it's a quite a different feeling, physically, emotionally, all the things balanced out. If you can do that, it's a really good, it's a fantastic opportunity if you're able to do that stuff. And again, back to data, back to holding on to information, back to the relationship building with your athlete, having a safe environment with them to be able to discuss those things, to be able to like talk about how that looks, how you're reacting, what the behaviors are like. It's really a lot about sharing information, you know, to gather that information. The regular check-ins, doing the video, the review, the drills, the progressions. Your technical development must stay ahead of the physical development. So I want to say this, the technical pieces are trying to not, again, do the biggest kind of jumps, do the biggest throws, do the heaviest things. It's about doing the small pieces right so that you can prevent the injuries, prevent what's going on, to prepare them for that next piece. It's quite important. The physical development, as we talked about, the strength, the speed, mobility, and event-specific conditioning. I really moved my coaching from the beginning days. I did the general things. I was following a very extreme program of a one. My one peak was going to happen at the biggest event, whatever that could have been. And so we focused everything towards those elements. But now I understand that you're able to do a lot of different mini peaks within this time space. And so to get your physical development and to get things going, I need to do more event-specific movement. So there's very much event-specific movement in all the training that we do very early on, with sprinting, with jumping, with throwing. And so it's not these large movements waiting for them. It's almost like we do this, out of a four-week cycle. We're doing event-specific movements continuously in our week with different types of weights, different types of speed, all sorts of different kind of, additions to see how that goes and works out. Balanced development to prevent injuries. That whole balancing the body, left side, right side, front, back, cross-sectional. These things are very important. Again, love hearing walking down the steps. Walking down the steps with weight or an imbalance of something is like it's this huge golden key that maybe we've not thought about before, but that we do more of now. So the bodies are having to do this, trying to jump, trying to balance and hold it on one leg. When athletes start at the beginning of the year, super wobbly, you can physically see the wobble city, it's all crazy. But you ask them to do that mid-year, it's like you can see they're stronger. Things are coming together, their bodies are more together. You're not asking for these huge events, you're asking for small events. Really, really well done. And then obviously the long-term athlete development principles. It always embeds in the planning that I have and that I've worked with, the mentors that I've been able to work with, that long-term development, not too much too soon. Even if your athlete shows that they possibly can, to try to hold back on yourself instead of running towards that awesome place that you want, that opportunity for a medal, trying to hold back so the athlete can develop naturally in their own way, in their own pattern. The psychological skills and support systems, these are really integral. I would imagine that every athlete that you have comes to your practice and does what you want. Can't imagine that athletes come, you're like, please do 2,000 burpees. They're like, yes, coach, here we go. Right? Those things happen. It's not so much what we're worrying about when the athletes are with us. I want to suggest that we need to worry more about what the athletes are doing when they're not with us, when we don't see them. how are they taking account and care for what needs to happen in their life to make sure they get their goals? The psychological skills and support systems are part of this training and really an integral part. The confidence built through preparation and repetition, a huge piece. If you have athletes with anxiety or athletes with, concerns about competing, to make sure they're building through consistency in competitions that maybe are a little bit lower volume, or maybe they get a little bit more excited. You get to build on these psychological skills for them. You can work on resilience. You get to learn from the mistakes and then the flat days. I hope that there's lots of flat days. I hope that you've experienced some really big bumps. Sometimes that is also managing an injury. Sometimes that's managing maybe, your cat died, whatever happened, like the human part of who we have and what we do and how you come to track, so that we're able to develop that, talk about that, work through that. So you're still good to go to get hopefully the goal that you're hoping for. Yeah.
When you talk about sport setup and you talk about the bumps in the road, obviously post-COVID, everybody's aware of post-viral fatigue. So that doesn't jump out at you right away. Sometimes that's like a slow burn. The athlete's still working hard. Right. You're still giving them programs, the numbers don't add up. So what do you do if you are suspecting some level of post-viral fatigue?
Right, so in part of my daily program, when I sit and talk to the athletes first, when we're talking about what we're going to do for each other, is I'm working for you, you're going to be working for me. What are we continuing to do? Part of that is journaling, or part of that is filling out some of my. The women will write for days, in my experience, and the men will be like yes, no, 1, 6, And I ask them to fill out like a simple like evaluational tool that can be super simple. They can give me as much information as they want, or they can give me yes, no, 1, 6, and then I get to understand and know more what's happening with that. So I'm hoping that with the daily logs, I'm able to reflect on those logs. I take my Sunday, that's the day. My Monday is like the beginning of my week. My Sunday is my reflection time. And so on Sunday, I'll look through those logs and see what my athletes have written, as well as it gives me the opportunity that they can share things in the written thing that I only get to see, and my assistant coaches, that we get to have like highlights of them. So there's lots of things through that, kind of like the daily logging, and it can be super simple. It can be 5 questions. Numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can circle it. That's how simple it could be. Or you leave there so there's space for them to discuss it. Because the psychological piece, I think when you're at the biggest games, the biggest wins, the psychological piece is the biggest difference, to be completely honest. When you're at the Olympics, when you're at the Paralympics, athletes are ready on both sides. You are the most fit, the most awesome that you've ever been, and you're standing beside the people that are also the most fit, most awesome. The thing that's going to make a difference between us is the psychological attitude about what's going to happen, how they can problem solve if something goes wrong. What does that look like? And so through the monitoring, daily monitoring of using like reflections, it helps me to know those athletes, and we have a communication tool that can be separate than our actual practice times. And so that's what I would suggest trying to do. Because the psychological piece is a very hidden monster, right? And that slow kind of fatigue or burn, like that stuff will come through with those things. You can also add in like heart rate evaluations inside there, simple just manual heart rate stuff. It also gives you some of the data that you could be looking for if the heart rate is changing. So help me understand, you're usually a 72, you've been a 72 for 56 days, and now you're going up to a 78. Sometimes it tells me you're getting sick, something stressful is happening in your life. Maybe they don't even know what's going to happen, right? So the tools have really given us the opportunity to evaluate beforehand, before things happen. So that's how I address some of those things.
The evaluation of the daily logging that using, is that recognized tool you use, or that is something you've made up?
Some we've acquired. I think with coaching, there's lots of acquiring of other people's skills and what they have used. And so we have put together things that we try to use. And it depends on the different athletes that I have. So the newer athletes, I really am hard on them about exactly how we'd like this to be filled out and what it looks like. And as athletes progress, and also their lives, right, in university, or now they're working, or they're trying to like make money from sport, it's like those will look a little bit differently depending on what that looks like. And so you can be very simple with it. It's like, it can be very easy, but yeah, we've made it towards so that it works for what we're specifically looking for with our people.
I think also maybe like we managed to a lot of people with neurodiversity as well. So
yeah,
does that just change as required therapy as opposed to the walking about that information.
Yeah, that would also, and adjusting what that looks like for them, and the questions that you may have. And so it's nice too, because depending on what you're looking for in the specific athlete and who the athlete is, you get to adjust some of the questions that you're asking them specifically and what they're getting. And they don't all share the same thing. It's not like a group share, right? They just give it back to the head coach or the assistant coaches. And so I can very specifically ask. It's like, enough, I know you have maybe some economical challenges and you have to work more than somebody else. And I'm going to be asking you about your sleep and what that looks like. More so a discussion of that than someone else that maybe has some economical, a little bit, they're better with the money. They don't have to worry about that as much. And so, which is kind of nice. It also helps me to understand if I say, a 1 of pain and a 5 of pain. 1 is 0, a 5 is like, your leg just got bit off by a shark. To know the athletes that have a really high pain tolerance. We had to move something this year. This athlete kept on telling us, it's like, I'm a 1, I'm a 1, I'm a 1. And I'm just like, this should be increasing. There should be some more leftovers on this. I'm not sure why this is happening. But his pain tolerance was so high. And then he had an injury. He tore his hip. We're just like, you're telling us you're a 1. You told us you're a 1 forever. Like, help us understand. He's like, no, but that's what that is for me. It's like, I'm going no matter what. I'm like, you're going no matter what. So his 1 was now his new 5. And so now the coaching, us and all the other coaches know that if this guy says it's a 1, it's a 5. So we immediately adjust what's happening. But we didn't know that until we talked more and had more discussion about who this person was and how they did their management. The growth mindset and belief in long-term trajectory. Your athletes, having that conversation with them, knowing about what they care about, what this is. How does that look? It's like, where do they want to go? Again, talking about what that is with them. The support system. I ignored the support system as a younger coach because I really thought it was me, and doing the work should give you this information, should give you the opportunity to do better. And it did. They did okay. They did really well. There's Meadows won, things happened. But it didn't get really great. It didn't get the athletes into the international stage really well, really quickly, until I started to pay attention more to the support system, till I understood them as more people than just the athlete in front of me. The family, the other coaches, sports scientists, therapists, and teammates. How those folks affected what the athlete was doing really did help me to build better plans for them so they could do what they need to do. And it also allowed me to, I want to say, include these folks into our systems to help them understand all the deals that are coming forward. Clear communication and aligned values, and a stable environment where the athlete feels valued and supported. The stable environment is a huge piece. If it's unstable, you're going to have some troubles. Sometimes you can't change that. It's a little bit tricky. Reduced injury risk and overtraining. Success increases when risk decreases. So that obviously starts with proper warm-ups, progressions, and load management. You're talking about movement quality and fundamental strength. You're trying to avoid big spikes in volume or intensity over numerous amounts of time. You will have big spikes in volume, you will have big spikes in intensity, but to do that week over week over week, that's when you're going to be dropping into troubles. And when to back off before breaking them. How do you know? What are the signs of your athletes of a pre-injury? That discussion, that relationship with your athlete is huge. Sometimes they're just going to walk by and they're like, oh, my hip feels weird. And they walk by. So hip feels weird for one could mean my hip's going to fall off for the other. So if you don't know, this is when you're going to get it. If you know your athletes well, you're going to be able to get on this before it becomes something major. In track and field, there's always going to be little bumps. If you can get on before it and have your IST team on it and have your strength and conditioning people on it, and if people are listening, your athletes will tell you before it gets really bad, is what I've usually found in the training that we have. And again, back to recovery. We've talked about recovery quite a bit. Recovery is huge. Recovery is huge. Recovery is the big secret. It's the big advantage. If you pay attention to recovery, your athletes will be able to have adaptation faster, easier. They'll be able to get this stuff done if you're paying attention to recovery. With sleep, with nutrition, hydration, with your mobility stuff, with your soft tissue work, with your mental recovery. What does that look like for your athletes? How many days do you give them off of not even having to think about track and field? Right? If you're like never, it's like, well, I would suggest that you let that happen. Because it really comes back. It'll come back to help you and help your athlete way more. And then the recovery, like we just talked about, the adaptation piece of it is huge. And now that we know that when we stress our bodies, adaptation has to happen, And so when you have the recovery, the adaptation will hold itself longer and will be so showing itself sooner. So which is really kind of cool. International success is built through knowing what recovery tools your athletes use to help them stay in the game. Some athletes use the boots that they go into afterwards, right? It really isn't nice. Some athletes use old school stuff, hot, cold. Some athletes will just go for a walk. Some athletes will, do a light massage. What does your athlete need? Going back to your discussions about what works for your athletes, going back to the relationship you have with your athletes, but what it helps them to get back in the healthiest way possible. Okay, and so the other part of this that we want to talk about is that now you have these athletes coming, and now they're starting to earn. They're going to track meets, that maybe there's a potential for them to earn some money. And depending on the scale of this, it depends on where they go to. We don't talk about this very much because people just haven't. And so this is why Frank brought me in, and he's like, let's talk about this a little bit more. And so I want to encourage you to build your competition earnings into the annual plan, okay? Instead of adding the meets later, because your athlete becomes better, they get invited to more things, that you're having this at the beginning of the year with the possibility of things happening for them, right? And that you're planning your meets by the category that you have, okay? So that you're actually thinking about the revenue, the money meets. And so the Continental Tour, International Invitationals, the high value local meets, where they can earn some potential money, what that looks like for them. And you're trying to talk about with your athletes about what is the goal. It's like the earnings, the appearance fees, the bonuses. What does that look like? And then going to the developmental meets, the local or regional meets that you need to go to be able to show up, show what's happening within your club, showing what's happening in your systems, to make sure that they have the technique, the things that they're ready to prepare for. And then of course, going to the qualification meets, the ones that you need to go to in order to go to the big ones. You gotta get those into your system. You can't always go to the ones that make the money, because that becomes a problem. You have to hit all of these different types of meets. And then the peak championship meets, so nationals, trials, World Paralympics, Olympics, that are in the plan. You want to schedule the revenue meets in the periods that won't harm major peaking cycles. Sometimes it gets a little tricky because people maybe want to see your people at a time that's not going to work for you. Maybe you're supposed to be in a deload week, but that's when they want you to compete. And so there's some tricks about that I want to talk about. And one of the things I want to say is avoid back-to-back money meets and heavy training weeks unless the athlete's prepared. Unless you counted that in already, you should not be going to double meets when you're in a heavy training load. That really takes away from the athlete and the goal at the end of the time. And so what is suggested and what works, I think, for many athletes and many people that are working right now, that you're going to blend the income generating meets with the training cycles, and you're using a wave pattern. So the wave pattern is like a high load training to medium load, then tapered, and then compete and earn, and then a return to low. And so this keeps earning opportunities available to you year round without compromising the training foundation, without giving it away, right? Without having to make a pretty important error because you want to go after that money or after that opportunity, and you didn't put it into the plan. And so this is the time when you want to think about these things, when you are doing your planning and what that looks like. And so the suggestion is athletes can be competitive, strong enough to win the money without fully tapering. And so what we have found is that using little mini peaks are really helpful for when you have sharpness, that the technical readiness is happening, and you can still earn, but without sacrificing the main intent, the main hope of what you're trying to get done. You can still go to these meets and still incorporate them in. It can happen, but you want to make sure that the main championship peak is still happening. You're thinking them as a business opportunity built into the structure. You're thinking about the opportunity for your athlete to gain money, which could ease off their mental strain, which could help them towards doing better at that big performance, maybe. So when you're going to choose the events, you want to choose wisely. You want to preserve recovery to prevent burnout. So these are the things that get a little bit tricky. As your athletes start moving into this pattern of maybe earning potential through track and field, and maybe it's not a lot, but still more than what they've had before, you want to make sure that you're thinking about their the earning money. Does it gain them in rankings? Are they able to practice under pressure? And then is this a good tune-up before a major games? If these things are checkmarked when you're thinking about the meets that your athletes are going to go to, then it's like if it looks good, then probably put them in your plan. If it doesn't look good, then the athlete should not attend. But maybe one of your most difficult conversations will be when an athlete's been asked to go someplace and they'll pay for everything, and there's an opportunity to earn some money there for them. And you have to suggest to them, it's like, maybe this is not the best time for you. Maybe we shouldn't do this because of here's the other reasons to do this. Sometimes that becomes a little bit of an interesting conversation. Yeah.
Have you had any issues with the federation, like wanting athletes to compete and like local meets or anything that have been forced to go early? Are you able to then like do usually a short plan and be like, this doesn't fit, so can we not do that?
Right. Depending on the federations, I have discussed with other coaches that their federations are really concrete about some of those things, and so they don't have the ability to adjust. Luckily enough for me, being in Canada, our federation is really quite supportive of earning potential, and they're really about the long-term athlete development, where we do have our Y2P and programming and so forth. So those discussions would be taking place earlier, and so that we'd have that set up beforehand. But definitely with federations, that is a concern, as I hear from other coaches in other countries, that they have concerns about those things that are happening to them. And so, again, the earlier that you have the discussions with your athletes about the possibility of these meets happening, you're able to then, incorporate that into the YTP, incorporate that into the, your national sport body to ensure that everybody is on task with, what this is kind of looking like, what this is coming to.
Yeah, I think to make things even more complicated, when you've got an athlete trying to get into a meet, a continental tour meet, and they're going to find out last minute if they're going to get in or not that week. Yeah, 3 or 4 days beforehand, just to make it even more hard for the coach. Yeah, it becomes really a tricky wicket. And so really what I'm trying to hopefully share in the message that you're getting is the preparation of the possibility and what you have for that. And so if you're prepared for the possibility of great things that could be happening to your athlete, then you're more prepared for the scenario of this coming into play for you. And so to be prepared beforehand, and just with everything we do at track, I think we can be the kings and queens of preparation, which is awesome. But now including this monetary piece, especially with this continental business, when you may not be invited into like 2 nights before, especially if people are just starting out, right, getting onto the tours. It's like, it may be a day before, can you come? Yes, I absolutely can. But hopefully we've managed that, so you're in a bit of a deload week, and so you're able to, do that last day where we can go in for a practice opportunity for yourself, and you're going to go in. And when you do these meets, you're not going in to get a personal best, that's not the goal. You're going into maybe, think about different aspects of what you're trying to gain, like a movement pattern or a tactical piece in a race, like something else. It's like when you go into these meets for money, ultimately the suggestion is you're working on practicing to practice what that looks like, right?
So
Go first.
I was just wondering, if you're talking about the travel, and obviously the effect that the travel can have on athletes, because it can obviously have to travel to a different continent.
Yeah.
Could you give them a protocol that they would follow during their travel, whether how much to drink, when to drink it, what to eat, what not to eat, stuff like that?
Yes. Yeah. I'm very particular. I'm very particular about how I believe that travel. Sorry, this could have maybe my phone. I believe that travel is one of the things we maybe forget about. And I think it's huge on our athletes. It's huge because the travel stress part it may not even be about how many hours I'm traveling, but it's like what I've had to deal with in the line of this, maybe not getting a seat over here. I'm beside a crying baby. I get off the train, the people aren't there I'm supposed to be there to meet, my bag's not there. All these things that are giving the athlete extra stress, it causes the internal. Like the whole adrenal piece is like, I'm on fire. And so that part to me, travel stress is a huge deal. So I am very specific about what the expectations are, about what you need to do when traveling. And the ability to problem solve and to feel comfortable in the problem solutions of that. If there's not somebody there, if a flight has been missed, like we go through the possibilities of what you do in these scenarios of things that could happen for you. And so, yes, I am a little bit more determined on those things.
So you have it down in black and white?
Yeah. Like in it, they have it in it. Like, so each athlete will be like, listen, I know one of my athletes, like, fantastic. You're a beautiful sleeper on the plane. Great. I feel comfortable if you go over here and you're going to compete over here. That's fantastic. You do great on planes. I have another athlete that is terrible on planes, horrible, bad sleeper, like just a terrible sleeper. And so it really affects what's happening to them. What happens? We have gone into so when we've gone to the Olympics, Paralympics, I have my athletes save money so they can get better seats, because the actual laying down is a huge recovery tool, and it saves me days and days of trying to acclimate on when we land. So by saving some money, spending some of their money on a seat is gonna help us do the performance piece. And so, yeah, travel is huge. To me, travel has been the biggest miss, and now hopefully the biggest advantage in what we get to do and things that we're doing. So that's why it's quite a big thing. The sleep disruption, how much they have, what they do, what's happening with them in a different time zone, what's happening with them if they have to do media stuff afterwards. What does this look like? Are they getting some sleep? How much sleep are they losing? Are we able to use it better? What does that look like? And then you'll start to know the meets, the places that they can go that are really good about respecting what the athletes need, like with all those things, right? And then the emotional fatigue, you know, if I didn't run well, if I didn't jump well, I didn't throw well, what that feels like to them. And if I have these week after week, if I'm not performing week after week for whatever reason it is, like that stuff builds up. That's just reality. I'm not feeling great. I'm earning some money, but my performance isn't where I think it should be, nor is it happening with our programming. This is not going on. And the other piece is like, you know, we don't get to go to all the same meets. Like you will go and earn money, but I have to stay home because I have other things to do as well. You know, like, so the coach maybe is not there all the time. So which is another piece about why it can be becoming troublesome. And then just the nervous system alone about what that is. It gets tricky, so build recovery weeks or rest waves immediately after travel heavy revenue periods would be what I strongly suggest.
Yeah, and just to be clear.
Yeah.
When we're doing a money earning session, that doesn't stop us building in a performance development component.
Oh, no, not at all, yeah. I believe that like through competition, we get to learn so much more. And through competition, you get to do, you know, and gather information and data. And also too, those surprise moments from your athletes where you're like, oh, holy cats, this wasn't supposed to happen yet. But here you go, in this scenario, on this day, you became the queen of this thing. It's like fantastic. Let's review why that could have happened, what happened beforehand so that you're able to get that. And so again, through this whole thing, it's like you need to monitor, keep track, know what's happening, monitor your athlete readiness and adjust. You're using subjective tools like the wellness questionnaires, the session, like the personal performance stuff. How's their own, how are you doing? What's going on? The jumps testing, part of the story. Your strength markers, where are we at? This allows you to decide, do you go to the meet? Do you pull out? Do you perform but not chase a PB? I really want to talk to you about that. I'm hoping that you hear that. It's like when you go to these money meets, unless you've decided this is a meet where, you know, the possibility of a really strong personal best attempt is happening for you. There's so many other things that you can get done at these meets, still perform well, still gain money, you know, but not have to go after that personal best, even not having that discussion with your athletes. Like, you're not going for the big win here. You're not going for a personal best for life. It's okay if you consistently want to work on this technical piece, consistently like 3 out of 6 throws that you're staying in this position. This is a win for us. Right? And so depending on what you're looking for at these things, and then of course you're going to go to meets where you're like, yes, please win. We're going for it. We want you to be the best. And are you going to do 1 race instead of 2? More from the running side of stuff and the stuff that I work with sprinters. It's like, yes, you can do the 1 and the 2. Yes, totally. Or you can do the 1 and the hurdles. Fantastic. Have at it. But are we going to do this at the meets that are offering money? And so why would we choose to do that? Maybe we can just go in and do the 2, especially if there's rounds. It's okay to go into something, gain some money, have the experience, but just do 1 thing, right? Maybe you're going to meet or you're doing 1 race, so you're doing more tactical things. Maybe you're trying some tactical adjustments while you're doing this. You still know mostly, maybe you'll be top 3 here, but what's the tactical piece that you want to get out of this race? And to get that done, you're not going after the best every time you go. But the trick is the money people will be like, we want the best from you, we personal best, here's a little bit extra money. If you get this record here, it's a little bit extra money. It becomes an interesting story. You want to select the competitions to evaluate each meet. The ranking points are huge, obviously, the quality of the field, the travel and recovery demands, the financial return, and for like Paralympic, it's like classification opportunities. If it's a negative, that's better than the positive, you don't attend it. And so depending on what that looks like for you and your athletes, those are the questions you're going to ask, and then hopefully answer through them for them. And so the other tricky piece is the agents, these wonderful agents. Communications with agents and sponsors. These are the folks that are going to want things from your people all the time. They don't care about your systems. They don't care about when your peak is, what you're trying to do. But you can find people that do care. You can find agents and sponsors that will care about what's happening to your athlete, what they're doing. What you need to keep in consideration is that to ensure everyone understands the peak performance dates. So when you're talking to the agents, that they know when the dates are that are very important to the athlete. That you know the meet availability windows. That you're really specific about, here's a great time for us to compete. Please go ahead and try to find us some meets inside that area. That you know the periods where income meets can occur. Some agents will just be like, whatever I want, I'm going to go for it and try to get you the most money. Hopefully that's not the story. It gets really tricky if that's what's happening. Agents will push hard for earnings. Coaches, I believe, and the support systems must protect the athlete from this. And hopefully that can be a discussion with you, your athlete, right? And then the agent comes in, you can be a group. Sometimes agents can be fantastic. They can be fantastic and be with you because they understand the healthy athlete is a more opportunity for the agent to earn money, but also for the athlete to earn money as well, depending on who it is. So you have to be careful. You're going to create a shared calendar that all parties sign off on. Because in the early days when everybody's like, yeah, this is great. Come on, everybody, let's sign off. This sounds great. And everybody signs. Then all of a sudden you're in a pretty heavy training load. The agent's like, hey, you just got accepted into this meet. It's going to be this amount of money. Let's go. You'd be like, can we reflect back on this, please? It's like, we agree that this is not going to happen right now. And so to help people stay in line, intact, use the early and late season for earnings. That's kind of the best way that we found. That's happening right now. Maybe that will change with the different types of meets that are coming out, like Athlos, the new super meet that's happening at the end of this year.
Ultimate.
Oh yeah, sorry, the ultimate meet. So the new meets that are coming out, maybe it's a bit more tricky. We're hoping that they stay within that, do it early, do it late, so that the athletes have done their large events they're supposed to get done for their points, their rankings, and all the things. Many athletes make the most money in the early season, May and June, because you're pretty fresh, and meets have usually higher payouts because they want people to start getting involved in track and field. And then late season, after Worlds or the Olympics, Paralympics, many meets add bonuses and appearance fees because now they know who's in the game. Now they know what's happening, and so they're all about, it's like, these people have really performed, you're gonna have put people in the stands for us, so we want you to come, okay? So which is kind of nice. If you can keep your mid-season, whatever that looks like in the year, more control to protect the championship peak, that will probably serve you well with the pre-planning if your athletes get to do this kind of stuff. So protect the peak no matter what. That's your number one. That's your number one. Athletes may need money, but if they plan jeopardizing the Olympics, Worlds, trials, the long-term cost is too high. I've seen many athletes go for money, and then they can't go for performance. It's got to. Right? They have money now, but they're never going to get that medal. So that's a harder thing to get. The job as the coach, I think, is to ask, does this meet help or hurt the major championship performance? Does this help or hurt what we've talked about, where we think we could be, what this looks like in the future? If you think it hurts, decline it. If it's possible to decline it, even if the money is attractive. The hard part is the money is attractive. And that's the biggest piece. Great coaches don't choose fitness, they build readiness. They don't simply prepare athletes for competition, they prepare them to seize the moment when opportunity arrives. Through all of these different aspects, through all these different groups, the coach and the athlete, they should never be alone, right? You should have a support system around them. You use that support system properly, you're going to be able to do many, many, many things. Awesome. Thank you. Oh, questions?
Do you say you simplify the tactical or technical input when the money meets? That's when it costs the athlete 2 or 3 places. Doesn't that affect their money return?
I guess it depends on the scenario for the individual. So it does cost. It does cost them that place in the return of what that looks like. And so that would be the discussion about what meet you're going to and why. And then if it is that you have prepared them for these meets, the other piece is that you prepare them for the higher earning meets so that they are ready to go. So they don't go to all the Diamond League pieces, they're going to go to 3. Right? But at the 3, they're trying to do the best they can. So you have done your mini peaking, you've done your tapering, you're in that scenario where like, we're gonna go for this. This is something that we're going after right here. And so that you have those 3 experiences that are really trying to hit it properly. Yeah.
Oh. One of the things that I've kind of run into sometimes is if you have an athlete that's maybe maybe not up and coming, but like maybe not the super top tier, but like tier below that. And they have, let's say, a Diamond League opportunity comes up. It's like, hey, you want to get in this meet? It's 5 days. Like, how do you plan around things like that? When opportunities like literally pop up the last few days, and you're also trying to compete for a major championship and things like that.
Right, that's the trickiest part, right? That's the trickiest part, and that's the part about this international, moving into the international piece, where your athletes will be invited to some places. And so really to go back to the reflection of your relationship with that athlete, what it is right now in that cycle. If you're in an off year, like not an Olympic year, the possibility to jump into that need to have that experience, because within that experience itself would be exceptional for the competition piece of it, right? To get ready to go through, to have the crowds do all the things. And so depending on who you are with your athlete and what that looks like at that time and where you are in your program and planning, right? Like sometimes those things are things you want to go after no matter what. And you could be in a training phase where you're just like, we didn't plan for this. And so we're still in a loading piece, but can I deload you a little bit earlier to ensure that we're going to try to give it the best shot that we have. But then you and the athlete know going into this opportunity that you're not totally unloaded for this. And to see how they do. And sometimes the athlete just really accelerates into these things because they have the opportunity. So the psychological piece of going in to have these opportunities really, many people have told me it's like adrenaline is like jet fuel, right? Adrenaline is jet fuel. And so maybe you're programming, you're the king and queen of programming and making sure your athlete's great. But they go into an opportunity like this when they could have been loaded, when it could have been a surprise. Adrenaline helps them get to this next piece really quickly. And sometimes athletes really will surprisingly do their top awesomeness at that time.
Talked about weight periodization, one of the ways of managing these opportunities, but then you sort of came back to like the main peak. So what's one task is for your athletes, you tend to have an overarching single periodization year and then overlap the undulating periodization on top of that.
Right, and so the first, so if I'm in an Olympic year, the Olympic would be the most important meet that I have. But I work on a cycle of, I want to call it a 3 and a 1. And so I have 3 weeks. My first 2 weeks are loading. My third week, depending on what those other 2 weeks have looked like for us, is also a loading piece. But my fourth week, I call it the deloading or the neural, like the inflammation, like let go of. You know, I need to like make sure the inflammation is coming off, coming down. I'm finding now with all the neural stuff, neural information that we're getting, there's all these great things about adaptations and when the adaptations occur. And depending on who your athlete is, how inflamed your athlete becomes in the neural action that you have in, say, those first 2 or 3 weeks, I need a full week of trying to have them come out of that inflammation, trying to deflame them to be very specific about what that looks like. And so I really work in that 3 to 1, but I will be incorporating meets or opportunities within that cycle. But so yes, there's definitely like a 1 peak that's like we're trying to get after, but there's all these little mini peaks from 6 to 8 weeks that are happening within the big months, especially, that are going to happen.
Very well. I think that's fascinating. I mean, I thought I knew all about annual preparation, but I've been re-educated today. Kim, a fantastic job. Thanks so much. Well, if you'll allow me just 5 minutes before we have a break, just to sum up 1 or 2 of the things that I've learned this morning. First of all, a guy called General Dewey, Italian general, beginning of last century, said, "Victory smiles on those who anticipate the changing character of war, not those who wait for it to happen, then try to adapt later." Of course, we've got to be adaptable, but we've got to be able to anticipate. What does that mean to us? If you're going to be coaching somebody for a major competition, Olympic Games or whatever, it's a 4-year cycle normally. It can be even longer. Very seldom is it shorter. And in that four-year cycle, we've got a picture of what excellence will look like then, not what excellence looks like now. Right? It's 1 step beyond that little girl that I mentioned earlier on today. What will excellence look like then? So you have a vision for where you're trying to get to, and you've got a plan to get there. However, you've got to take care of business year in and year out. And so you've got to be able to deal with milestones as well as your dream. What we have to understand is that in progressing towards the dream, it is never linear, right? It's never linear. At best, it steps. At worst, sometimes you have to go back to go up. We all know that as coaches. We've been through that kind of cycle. And what we have to remember also is that the components of the performance that you're going to need, they do not progress in parallel. They progress at their own levels. And we've got to be able to adjust our program to do that. So, unfortunately, when you're a chief coach in different sports, you can catch a cold in this. because you know where you're trying to get to, and the milestones might not actually be achieved on the way. And the people who are making the decisions, they think you're screwed up. But the fact is, you know you're going through this process, and I just wish the guys at the top end, the decision makers, would understand that it is a process we're going through. The other thing that picked up on this morning is this, and that is that we've got to have the courage in life to allow our athletes to question us. We've got to give them a sense of psychological security or safety in all of this. Too many coaches in my past life were, I'm the boss, you do what I say. But the world that we're in now, remember, they're taking ownership and they're going to be asking us questions. What we've got to be very sure of is what we know. And coaches only, well, most of us, we really need to know three things. You've got to know what you know. You've got to know what you don't know. You've got to know somebody who does and bring them to the party. And the trick is for all of us is to have that network of people that we can go to and to put our hands up when we don't know. That does not make us vulnerable to the athlete. The athlete accepts that we're all vulnerable in life and they appreciate your honesty. The worst thing we can do is to make an athlete the victim of our limitations. So one final, two things. Drills were mentioned earlier. I work every now and again with a guy called Boris Verkovsky. In fact, I brought him here to Glasgow to speak to Scottish coaches some years ago. And Boris Verkovsky was the chief coach for the Cirque du Soleil. What has that got to do with athletics? It's got an awful lot to do with all of us folks. I think we can all learn from other people's coaching methodologies, whatever it is they're preparing people for. And his kind of excellence was about life and death with some of the tricks that guys get up to. And I said, because he came from Eastern Europe originally before he went to Canada. I said, what was the difference between Eastern Europe and the West, apart from the drugs? What was the difference between Eastern European coaching and Western European coaching in these days? He said, well, Frank, it's about drills and technique. What do you mean? I said, well, we've got different perspectives on this. I still don't get it. He said, well, in the West, you're obsessive with technique. The elbow has to be here, the hips have to be here, the hand has to be there. And we're not like that. Why is that? Well, to take a sidestep, I also work with a guy called Jan Tyriak, who's Boris Becker's manager. And he said to me, Frankie, every technique is a compensation. It took me a while to work out what that meant, but it's the truth. None of you run in the same way. Huh? No athlete high jumps the same way. Doesn't matter what, they will all have their own compensations. And I get that. Then I met a guy called Vin Walsh. He's a cognitive psychologist down in London. Some of you will have worked with him in time. And he said, never take the athlete the whole way. What do you mean by that? I said, well, because of the compensation, the athlete is their own director at some point. And notionally, any coach can take them the first 80%. But can we deal with the compensation? Can we coach the difference? Because at that point, the athlete's telling us what the technique is. We're not telling them. We adapt our style to that difference. So finally, just that. I said, well, what about drills then? He said, well, it's the other way around. See, we let the athlete evolve the technique, but we're obsessive about the drills. Every drill has a purpose. What it is and how it's to be done has to be on the button or the purpose is not served. Now, be honest, folks, as you look around tracks in Scotland and to different areas, how many kids have you seen going through drills and it's just a matter of routine? It's something the coach told us to do and we'll just get through. It's a job to be done. But the job is to do it to achieve the purpose of the drill. And if the athlete is not conscious of that, it's a waste of their time. So anyway, just 2 points on that. One final point, and I don't know if we can do this, Jimson. Can you possibly pop up
That's
the personal sustainability of it?
Yeah.
Because we've been listening to how well we look after our athletes, but I always like to make sure that we look after ourselves, folks. And
they don't have it actually.
oh, can you pop that up?
Yeah,
there?
because
And I shall leave this
Yeah.
on when you go out. I work with a friend who's just written a book called Your Business Sucks. And what he was trying to say in the book was that in a lot of people's lives, it's not the person who's controlling their business, it's the business that's controlling them. And of course, that never happens with us, does it? Never happens with us. Well, in his book, he put in this little personal sustainability audit. And before you leave, or maybe just cast your eyes through it over the break and ask yourself how you would score in that. To my terrible embarrassment, I would have failed terribly in that audit, because I'm very conscious that in life as a coach, I was never thinking about my own well-being and coming out the other side and making sure I was fit to do my job. But the fact is, all the wear and tear that you've heard Kim so eloquently pointing out, that's happening to you too. And we've got to take stock of that. And we've got to build in our own recovery. Otherwise, we will not be doing the job that we're supposed to be doing. I'll let them put it up, but I'll let you get out. I promise you'll still give you a half hour, because we want to be asking questions of people. Half hour break, folks, and we'll come back for not even better stuff, just as good stuff. Thanks very much.